Hi, I'm Schuyler Bailar, and I'm the first transgender athlete on a Division I men's team. The main reason that I do any of this speaking and sharing about myself is to prove the possibility, like I was saying earlier, to be yourself in any facet of what that means to you, and also do what you love. And the number one reason that that's important to me, to show that possibility, is because when I was coming out, when I was a kid, I didn't see anybody like me. And that made me conclude, even as like a sixth grader, that I couldn't be myself in the sports world specifically, and sometimes in the world. And that can lead to a lot of hard feelings, especially for a younger kid when they feel like they don't belong. And I Googled excessively when I was coming out, trans swimmer, LGBTQ swimmer, like every single night. I was trying to find somebody. Nobody ever came up. Now, when you Google trans swimmer, LGBTQ swimmer, queer swimmer, I come up. And some other folks too, which is really cool. And it's not about me coming up and me being able to be Googled, it's about a trans athlete, a trans swimmer coming up and proving to little kids that they can actually do that. So that's really what I want people to take away from that. And you don't have to be trans to take something away from that. I think it's bigger than that. It's about being able to bring your full self anywhere, and recognize that you're going to be that much more productive because your energy is going all into what you're doing as opposed to trying to hold your identity back. So trans people do go through, specifically trans people go through a lot of dark times, and I think just for education's sake, it's important to note that up to 40% of trans adults have attempted suicide at least once in their life. And that's a staggering statistic. That's like 1 out of every 2 trans folks have attempted suicide, where the national average is under 1%. It's like 0.01%. So the suicide rate for trans folks is ridiculous, and a lot of the reason for that is what I was describing, is it's a lack of belonging, a feeling like you don't belong. Your parents reject you, society rejects you, friends reject you. And so what I always say to kids like that is, first of all, I understand a lot about how that feels, and I'm not there anymore. And I mean that not to say that you can't be there now, because I get that. It's more that I promise that it goes away, and that it can dissipate, and that there is a place in the world for you, even if your place isn't with your parents, even if your place isn't with the friends you have right now. It is absolutely crucial for me to get to kids and make them understand, or at least have them hear me to say that there is more. And for me, there was a voice inside my head in the many times that I felt suicidal whispering to me, there is more. And so I say to other trans folks, specifically trans kids, that if you can't hear yourself saying that there is more, please hear me, there is more. Parental support with LGBTQ youth is absolutely crucial. Specifically with trans people, parental rejection can increase suicide attempts by 3.5 times, and can increase substance abuse by 2.5 times. And there's plenty of studies that support these. Sometimes the statistics are even worse. So the point is, like, there is very real evidence that if a kid feels unsupported by their parents, that they are going to attempt suicide that many more times. 3.5 times is insane. And so on the flip side, though, the hopeful thing is, or the hope-giving statistics is, that it reduces suicide by the same number, and sometimes more, to have family support. So in a study that I read recently, of all trans kids, the kids that were socially transitioned and had supportive and inclusive, accepting families showed depression rates indistinguishable from cisgender folks. That means that all of the risk of being trans in terms of mental health was mitigated by parents being accepting. So it is absolutely crucial, and 100% can be life-saving, literally life-saving to your child, for you to accept them as a trans person. I think not having people to turn to in sports can often cause people to feel like they can't do things. And with my particular experience, what we all did really well, I think, was name that and be like, we don't know what we're doing. We have no idea. We're gonna just do our best. And we're gonna communicate the hell out of this, excuse my language. But it was about asking each other. So Kevin, my coach, at the beginning, he was like, what bathrooms do you want to use? Because that was a question. Yeah. And I said, I want to use the men's bathroom just like everybody else. And he said, okay, well, if you ever feel unsafe there, let me know. And you can use my room, or you can use a different one, and we'll figure it out. But please know that you don't have to do that if you don't want to, and you have a backup plan. I never needed a backup plan, but even the conversation of like, if you need something, we're going to figure it out was really, really important to me. And we didn't know everything. We had no idea what we were doing. Like, we didn't know what paperwork to do, who to send it to. So all of it was like, okay, here are the things we might need to do. Like, let's figure it out together. And it was, really about that communication. And so hopefully for other folks going through this, they won't have to start from zero of not knowing anything. But in spaces that folks feel like they don't know what to do, name it and work through it together, because it's absolutely possible, and I'm here to prove that it's possible, but all the details need to be worked out, and people need to work out that together. I describe sort of classical achievements, stereotyped achievements as paper successes. And what I mean by those are things that you can like write down on a piece of paper and say like, this is something I did. So medals, I don't know, getting your driver's license, getting good grades, that kind of stuff, diplomas, graduation certificates. And those, it's not at all to say that those aren't important. I have built my life, especially before college, around paper successes, and I still, go after those. But they don't mean everything to me anymore. And the reason for that is I think that there's so much more to my life than that. And I had all of the paper successes that an 18-year-old could have. I had all of the, the graduation diploma, the 4.0, the Harvard, the swimming. I had it, and I was miserable. And it didn't mean that it was easy to let go of like that being my life path, but it meant that I was like, this is not working. And I knew that. I knew at the bottom of my heart, like, this isn't what I'm looking for in my life. And I think a lot of people have trouble reevaluating that and evaluating, like recognizing that they're miserable and then being like, why am I miserable? But I would encourage a lot of folks who feel that kind of misery, who feel that kind of loss, feeling of being lost, to wonder why. And it's not like what the hell is wrong with me? Why am I like this? It's like, I'm really curious why I'm here. And I actually do a lot of mentorship stuff and talk to folks and ask them the same questions. I'm like, so what do you want out of life? Is like a 4.0 GPA really gonna make you feel like you are enough? Because chances are, if you don't feel like you're enough, a 4.0 GPA is not gonna cut it. And that's just how people work, right? Like, it's not about that. People need fulfillment and peace, and they need to feel like they matter. And those paper successes don't end up actually giving you that. Sometimes it takes people just muddling through it until they realize it, and sometimes people take it from me saying it. It really depends on the person, but my encouragement to folks who are in that space is really to be curious about what would make them happiest, and not just happiest, but what would make them feel the most at peace with themselves and their morality, and fulfill them, if that makes sense. Being an ally to an LGBTQ person, specifically athlete in sports, number one thing for trans folks, calling people by the right name, calling people by the right pronouns. It doesn't mean if they're on the women's team, it doesn't mean if they're on like whatever team they're on, calling them by the pronouns that they ask for can be the easiest and most impactful way to make them feel included and seen. Other things so for coaches and stuff, being like, ladies, when you're talking to a bunch of people in a group, you don't actually know if everybody actually identifies as a lady. There are actually plenty of women who don't like to be called ladies too. I know plenty of girls who don't like that. So there's like, hey folks, like, hey y'all, like, hey everybody. There's a lot of ungendered terms that we can use. Some people are more resistant to that, but in any case, if you're trying to do something to be more inclusive, that's a great way to do that as well. And then also educating. So coaches and administrative staff and folks who are in sports, like, there's no reason they shouldn't be educating themselves about trans folks, because gender inclusivity is going to make any team better. It doesn't matter if you're the trans or LGBTQ person on the team. The more that you are inclusive, the more successful the team's actually going to be. And there's plenty of research about that as well. The more an athlete feels like they can bring their whole selves to the playing field or to the pool, the more they're going to perform better. The reason being, if I'm spending all of my time trying to be as masculine as possible and trying to hold back everything that, that stereotyped as bad about my identity, I'm going to be spending some of my energy on that when I really should be putting everything I have into swimming fast in the pool, right? So it's also productive, and you can market it to coaches that way, right? It's also productive in terms of literally winning. I think working up the nerve is honestly very similar to working up the nerve to getting on the blocks before a swimming meet. I feel very similarly when I'm preparing for this than I did when I prepared for swim meets. So part of it is practice, right? Like, I've been doing this my whole life. Not the speaking, but the preparing for an anxiety-filled event. And then the thing that drives me is that hope that I'm going to get to those kids who potentially might not think that they can make it. And I get pretty daily messages, if not weekly, messages from kids saying, hey, you saved my life because I see that now I can exist. And that means the absolute world to me. I cry every time I read those messages, and I meet kids. I met a kid last night who said that to me. And so it is beyond crucial to me to share this story, and despite the fact that it's scary, despite the fact that it takes a lot of my time, I'm on a 6-week-long tour doing this right now, it means the world to me to share that with folks, because I know how hopeless a person can feel in this moment, and I also know that this is not hopeless, because I'm here to prove that it's not.